Welcome to Let's Talk Passion and Purpose, the podcast where we explore the journeys of creators, leaders, and visionaries who've turned their passions into purpose. Join your host, Nicole Thomas, as we dive into inspiring stories, uncover strategies for success, and help you take the next step toward a life filled with meaning. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Passion and Purpose with Nicole Thomas. In this episode, I sit down with Alexander Boyce, and we explore his journey that's all about breaking boundaries, challenging stereotypes, and creating art that speaks volumes. In our conversation, Alexander proves that your limitations are nothing more than invitations to innovate. A little bit more about Alexander. Alexander Boyce is a creative visionary and artist whose work celebrates the beauty, pride, and strength of Black people. After a successful career creating music for shows like MTV Cribs and The Real Housewives, Alexander rediscovered his passion for painting, and it completely transformed his life. Through his bold, vibrant art, he is redefining representation using creativity as a force for love and positive change. Alexander, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Let's dive right in. I'd love to begin at the very beginning. How did your creative journey first take shape? And then also, what pulled you into the world of art and expression?
I would say my creative journey first took shape when I was a little kid. I grew up in a house with artistic people. My older brothers were artists in their own right. They painted and drew. One of them made furniture and did music. My mom was a seamstress. So I've been kind of doing art in some form or fashion all of my life. And I would say what drew me more into art and creativity is coming from a place of lack of resources. As a little kid, your parents were not able to buy the toys and things that you wanted. So you had to be creative and make some of them yourself. So that's kind of where it all started for me. And as a teenager, I would say being in love with fashion, like the eye and the cross colors and the FUBU and those kinds of things. And again, lack of resources and able to purchase them, I started making my own clothes. So it kind of came from a sense of necessity.
Here you're making toys, and the next thing you know, you're working with textiles and fabric. What did it feel like to move into that realm?
Well, my mom was a seamstress, so we always had fabric and fashion magazines and that kind of thing around the house. And she worked from the house, so there was always making things in the house. And so that, I guess, gave me a love for fashion and clothes. And it made sense to me to make it, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we have fashion and music. When did that creative aspect come in the picture?
For me, when I was a teenager, I started being involved with music. A lot of my friends, for some reason, I guess creative people kind of gravitate towards one another. So a lot of my teenage friends were involved in music or in like breakdancing, but we were all involved in music in some form of fashion. And I'm not sure who said it, but someone once said, everyone who truly loves music at some point tries to make it. I always had this love for music, and I guess it's a natural part of the journey for me to want to make my own music. And so as a teenager, I started writing songs and messing around with instruments, and that's where it started.
Oh, I tell you, that's fascinating. And I also want to point out that you're an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah.
So tell us the entrepreneurial aspect of the work that you do.
I guess when I first started taking music seriously, at some point you were forced to be an entrepreneur because you have to, especially if you're an adult, which I was at the time, you have to figure out how to feed yourself doing what you love. And so for me, it was a natural step. But I got a lot of that from my mom because she was a creative entrepreneur. She made dresses, and that's how she took care of us, her children. And so I learned a lot from her. I also learned a lot from my grandmother, who was a straight up businesswoman. She was not an artist or artistic in any way, but she was a street vendor in the Caribbean. And she was, you know, someone who was very resourceful. She made herself into a very wealthy woman just from like her grit and her resourcefulness and being a street vendor and later on owning stores and investing in real estate and that kind of thing. So I had good mentors and teachers coming up as far as entrepreneurial as well.
It sounds so. How have you been able to marry all of these different elements of your creative work? Because I do see you as an innovator and a creative visionary.
That's a very good question. It wasn't always easy as it is for me now, because
Mhm.
when I mean, all of my life, I've always thought of myself as a musician, and I've always thought that this is, what's my life going to be about. And that was my purpose. And so once I started having other interests, I felt almost like I was cheating music, and I was being interested in other things. So it was very hard for me in the beginning. And I learned early on, I was part of a tech startup, and I learned that you could be creative in business as well. And that kind of sparked a love for business and product development and product placement. And so I became more interested in the business side of things. And for a while, I took a little bit of a hiatus on music and just focused on getting the business part right, because that's very important as well as a creative person.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think a lot of artists and a lot of creatives, and I don't think it's just creatives. I just want to make it universal. There are people who focus on a niche and then they forget the business aspect. You talk a lot about passion and purpose. Why is this so close to your heart, especially being a creative?
Yes, I love people who are passionate about things. And because people who are following their passion, to me, are almost childlike, in the sense that they're so innocent, in that they do things for love. That is their motivation. They do things because they love it. And so when you're passionate about something, and this is, I guess, what I would say is, when you want to do something that bad, you have to really love it, because there are going to be times, especially in business, there are going to be times when no one's calling, nothing's selling, nothing's happening. And the fuel that you're going to need to keep going is that passion and that childlike hopefulness for the future, and that optimism that comes with being passionate about things. So I love people who are passionate because it's so pure. I love purpose because, to me, that is, I believe, in my opinion, the ultimate life is to find out what your purpose is. There's no higher purpose, if you will, in life to me than finding out what your purpose is and living through that purpose.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And it sounds as if you have landed in your purpose. And as I mentioned earlier, you've been able to marry all of these different elements of who you are and creative aspects of your being. What do you say to people who struggle with just being multi-talented? Because sometimes there's feedback. No, you have to focus on art. And maybe for yourself, focus only on music. Your attention is too divided. But you've been successful in all of these different areas. How have you been able to stay fueled and not let that criticism suppress a fire that's in you to move forward?
I say it's all in the desired outcome. You, as the individual, have to know what is your desired outcome, because you can so be multidisciplinary. I mean, most artists are passionate about multiple things. And as we go out into the world and we deal with business, everyone has to niche down and focus on one thing. And that's what they say. But in my case, I know that I love music, and to me, music and visual art and fashion, all of it, they're like my children. And that is like asking a parent to pick which one is your favorite. And for me, that is almost impossible to pick which one I enjoy the most. And so I know that I believe that I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say, and I like expressing myself through my art in different kinds of ways. I dress according to my mood, my music, my art. It's all an extension of me and my expressions. And so I believe when you know what your desired outcome is, it's begin with the end in mind, and then walk back to where you are and figure out the next steps. I mean, it's going to be natural once you do that. Begin with the end in mind, and then you walk back to where you are.
Yeah, such great advice. What inspires your work?
Life mostly inspires my work. Different things, but it's mostly life. I, as a Black man, for instance, my perspective on life my art is that of the perspective of a Black man, and coming from a single parent family household where my mom was the head of the household. If you look at my paintings, it's mostly of Black women. And for a child, mother is God in another word. And so for me as a Black man, the ultimate beauty, love, nurturer, my world is a Black woman. And so if you look at my visual art, it reflects that. And my music is about me trying to measure up. And all of my music, I believe, it's about me trying to measure up and give that Black woman, whether it's my significant other or my mom, some kind of pride in that this is my man or this is my son. And so that's what inspires my art mostly. It's the desire to be good and do good for my queen.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you've spoken about countering negative portrayals of Black people with vibrant, uplifting imagery. What inspires the stories you choose to tell through your paintings? I know that there's a certain portrayal, but what deep-rooted inspiration comes through it comes through your art?
I believe, like, when you look at the media that's out there, right? One of the things that's always bothered me, for instance, with Hollywood, is the way they portray Black women, right? And as a Black man, I mean, it's so bothering to see that. For instance, a stereotype that always bothered me, and if you've had any conversation with me, we've spoken about this a million times. The fact that in the movies, as far as Hollywood, the educated Black woman always comes off as abrasive and too aggressive and rude. And that is so not the experience. I have a ton of Black women friends who are very educated and who are the sweetest people ever. But that's not the portrayal in the movies. They portray, if she's educated and she's Black, she's a B word. And so those kinds of things, I feel compelled to go against that narrative, because in my experience, that is so not true. I've had Black women as teachers in school who are just the nicest people you've ever met. I have family members who are educated Black women who, again, my older sister is like one of my best friends, and she's a very educated Black woman. And so I feel compelled to go against that narrative. The same way as Black men in our mainstream media, how we are portrayed, the narrative that's out there of us, it's so incorrect of what we truly are. So a lot of what I do is to kind of counter that narrative.
Yeah, that makes sense, because there are so many stereotypes that do not align to our reality. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your creative process?
My creative process.
Do you have a specific method or rhythm when you're creating?
With music, it's more spontaneous because it's more what comes, and I just go with the flow. And with the visual art, especially being that I paint mostly portraits, my process is very spiritual and almost ritualistic. So when I'm preparing to paint something, first of all, I like getting dressed up. That's part of the energy that I put out. So I will dress up like I'm going to the biggest banquet. I'll put out some wine and cheese and grapes, and I might even light some candles and set the tone with some music, because I want it to feel like a celebration, because that's what I do with my art. I'm celebrating the beauty of Black people. So I want to set the whole tone. If I'm painting someone who has transitioned to the next life, I will spend some time looking at that image that I'm going to paint, and I will try to communicate with that person's spirit. And I will ask for permission, because I believe what I'm doing is capturing that person's essence. And to me, that's a very spiritual thing. And what I mean by capturing the essence is a lot of portrait artists, they focus more on resemblance. So if they're painting a picture of James Baldwin, they're focused more on making that painting look like James Baldwin. What I'm focused on is I'm trying to have the viewer feel like James Baldwin is sitting here looking at you. So I'm not focused much on the resemblances. I'm focused on his essence. I'm trying to get his vibe. And to me, that's a very spiritual thing. So I will ask for permission. And most times I get permission. And what I believe is permission is that when I'm done, it looks and it feels like James Baldwin.
That's powerful.
For me, at least in my case, my art, I don't believe it's just broadcast from one end to another. I believe it's a holistic experience where the viewer gets pulled in. And if you're familiar with my art, a lot of people say that's what the eyes do to them when they look at my painting. It looks like they're looking at you. And that's what I try to accomplish with my art.
It's fascinating, quite fascinating. Do you also paint on upholstery? How did you end up using upholstery in your artwork?
Well, again, it came out of necessity. There was a time when I first started painting and I had transitioned from the music business. So all of my discretionary income and then all of my income was going into just painting and art supplies and that kind of thing. And one day I was completely out of material to paint, canvas and stuff to paint on. And I just had this itch that I needed to paint. And there I had this big piece of leather that I had gotten from, I upcycle a lot of things. So I had gotten leather from an old futon that I just refused to waste. And it was just sitting there and I decided, let me paint on it. And then I was done with that. And then someone in my building was throwing out an old sofa. And I looked at it and the grains and the fabric was just so mesmerizing to me. And I just felt like, let me try. And I started, but again, it was all of necessity. And I painted on that. And I just fell in love with the way it looked. It gave it an almost pixelized kind of look. And so that's what I've been doing from then. I just started, instead of buying canvas, I started buying furniture, upholstery, and different kinds of fabrics. And so now I paint exclusively on furniture, upholstery.
I tell you, that's amazing. Talk about innovation. I want to talk a little bit more about your business and the fact that you are an artist. How do you balance artistry with entrepreneurship?
That's a tough one a lot of times. And I have to be very deliberate and separate myself because when I'm doing the art part, I have to be very careful not to think of how it's going to sell, who's going to buy it, and how much to sell. I have to be very careful that when I'm doing the art part, I'm doing it only for the love. So I'm painting images that I love, and that's it. And then when I'm done with the image and I satisfy that it's where I love it, then I figure out how to sell it. I learned that from watching interviews, old interviews with Steve Jobs. The way he felt was, you don't cater to the market, you make something and then you go find the people who love it. So that's the way I work with my art, and I make things that I love and then I put it out. And if someone likes it, then they like it. But it's very deliberate because one of the things that made me a little bit sour in the music business at some point was how, in the studio, a lot of people are focused on what's making a hit and what's going to sell. And that to me defeats the purpose because you're making art, and then you're focused more on what someone else is going to like, but you're the artist and you're supposed to like it more than everyone else. Because if you don't like it, you're not able to be a good salesperson for that product. So I have to be very deliberate in separating the art and the entrepreneurial part to make sure that when I'm doing the art part, I'm focused only on the art part and not deviate or put any attention to the selling part, because in my experience, it just won't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just thinking while you were speaking about your business and just the evolution of the work that you're doing. Tell me more about your business and what your vision is and where do you see it in a few years?
The ultimate vision for my business is I would like to create something that I don't think has ever been done before. Early on, when I started doing the fashion stuff and painting on, it was out of necessity, funny enough. I was sitting in my house looking out of my window in rush hour traffic, and I was just trying to figure out how do I get my artwork in front of people, because exhausted going to galleries, and it was early on in my journey. No one would take me seriously. No galleries would even speak to me. So my goal was, how do I get my art out there? And it just dawned on me looking at people rushing to work, and everyone's rushing in the morning, and everyone had a bag of some sort. Some people had 2, 3 bags, but everyone had a bag. So it hit me like, put my artwork on bags, and people would be in the street walking around with it, showing it off to other people unconsciously. And so that's how I first started doing the bags. And then I naturally like clothes. So it led to, from the bag, denim jacket, and then jeans and the different things. And then it evolved into like t-shirts and all the other things that I do. My my goal, after, once I figured out that part, my goal was to what I realized is, when you look at, the high end European brands, and you look at the imagery that they portray, they're celebrating the beauty of their women, right? Like, so the imagery that you'll see with Versace and the Gucci is, they're celebrating the beauty of European women. And subconsciously, like, some of our people are walking around helping them celebrate the beauty of their women. So I wanted to, again, do that for our women, celebrate the beauty of our women and celebrate the beauty of Black women. So that's why I use a lot of images of indigenous African women and tribal African women on my bags and in those kinds of things. I'm doing the same thing they're doing with their women, with our women. My end goal is really to be perceived the way that Gucci and that Versace and those brands are perceived, as far as the kind of value that people think they bring, in the same way I aim to do exactly that, but with Black faces.
Yes. I tell you, that's wonderful. And what a value add for the Black community, for Black women, to celebrate our culture. That's beautiful. You've been through a lot. What has been one of the biggest challenges you faced on your journey, and how have you overcome that challenge?
One of the biggest challenges I faced, I believe, and I think it's universal, and with almost anyone who's doing these kinds of things, is getting out of my own way, and imposter syndrome, especially coming from, when you come from a place of lack of resources, is how I like to describe it, and you don't have a lot of mentors and role models and people who've done the kind of things that you're attempting to do. It's very challenging to believe that you can do it, because oftentimes you're the first in your family to break that, and so the biggest challenge for me in my journey is shutting my mind off that little negative voice that say, you think you can do it? Who are you? And trying to talk myself out of my ideas. So the biggest challenge for me, I would say, is my own self, just getting over my own self and getting out of my way and just doing what I believe that is meant for me to do.
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome, or that critical voice that makes them doubt.
Yes.
How have you handled those times when that voice has come up?
I look at, I've been able to counter that by looking at every single success that I've ever had. And whatever it is, anything that and that's why I tell people all the time, it's very important to celebrate your wins, right? Even the tiny ones, because those help when that critical self-doubt creeps in. You want to remind yourself, I did this and I did this other thing and I did that. So therefore I can do that if I want to, I'm able and I'm worthy. And so I just keep telling myself that everything that I want wants me back. Everything that I desire desires me back. And everything out there that I set my mind to, I can get if I want to, because I was made for this. And so my self-talk, I like to say, is gangster. My self-talk is gangster, is the way I can describe it. I just tell myself, you can do this. You were made for this,
I love that. And, self-belief is so important, regardless of whether people believe in you or not. You have to believe in yourself first.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't believe it's true, but it is. It is. It
It,
starts
it
with
is so
self.
true.
Tell me, what is one win that you are really proud of that you want to share with our audience? We want to celebrate with you.
Well, in all of my wins, I will say the proudest win for me has nothing to do with art or creativity or business. The fact that I was able to beat cancer.
God
That's
bless
what I'm
you.
proudest of. And
Yeah.
my family, my wife, my kids were such pillars for me when I couldn't stand on my own. And but that's my proudest thing is that I did it. I went through all the treatments and the surgeries and the self-doubt and the fears and the dark days. And, there were times when I could barely stand up and, now I can run, So for me, that's like, I did it. And that is my proudest achievement is the fact that I am a survivor and I defeated cancer.
Yes. We have to celebrate that. What a blessing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And to have such a strong mindset to keep going because mindset is important.
Yes. The secret for me was when I first was diagnosed, that first day I had a good cry, got it over with. And I told myself, whenever anything challenges me, I always say this to myself, there is something for me to benefit in this situation. My mission right now is to find out what it is, embrace it, and push past. And so everything, that's what I've been doing. Just find out what's the benefit. What is there for me to learn in this? What's there to gain? Focus on that and embrace it and push past.
And as opposed to seeing it as necessarily a negative, seeing where there is an opportunity for growth and evolution,
Absolutely.
whether that's at the physical level or soul level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. What is the best advice you have ever received on your journey?
The best advice I've ever received. That's a good one. I don't know if it's an advice, but the highest compliment, I believe, or the best advice, or the biggest gem I think that I've ever gotten is, you are better than you think.
Say that again.
You are better than you think. Most of us are very critical with ourselves, and we beat ourselves up way than we would. Like, we make a mistake and we're so down on ourselves, as opposed to if your friend was able to make a mistake, you would automatically go in and say, it's okay, you just made a mistake, and right. But most of us don't do that for ourselves.
We don't.
You
Yeah,
know?
we don't show.
If most people would have taken a serious audit of themselves, I believe they would find that the problem is that they underestimate themselves as opposed to overestimate themselves. There are a few among us who, overestimate ourselves, but I believe most people underestimate themselves. So you are better than you think.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, that's incredible, and that resonates. And I think that goes back to that critical voice. And then also there are societal pressures.
Pressures is there.
Yeah, societal
They
pressures.
hammer us, because one thing I always say to people is, you're in a room filled with people, you call yourself stupid, no one will stop you. But the minute you say I'm a genius, everyone has an issue, right? So you have to make sure that you can give yourself credit where it is due, and you cut the noise out.
Cut the noise. Yes, because sometimes the world tries to, and sometimes does a good job, tries to
Yes.
humble you.
Yes, especially with us.
How have you managed to weed through all of those distractions to create the work that you do? And when I say all the distractions, it's not just imposter syndrome. It's not just societal pressures. It is also our socioeconomic climate that we're in. How are you able to produce and focus on elevating Black culture in a time such as this?
Wow. For me, I've always had the ability to zero in on what's important to me. I'm one of those people that have always spent a lot of time by myself. So from a very early age, I always had a clear picture of the kind of person that I wanted to be. And once you understand the kind of person you want to be, the steps that you need to take, I believe, come naturally. And so whatever the distractions are, they're going to be clearly labeled. My older sister a long time ago told me once, once you understand what your priorities are, every decision is very simple. And I live by that.
That's powerful. Once you understand your priority, it's true.
Yeah.
When you think about it, right, you set your boundaries based on your priorities.
Yes.
Really love that. What do you want your legacy to be?
Mm. I haven't really thought of my legacy, but the legacies that I would like to be in the same conversations with, one of my heroes is James Baldwin, because he was a man of, I would say, such a normal stature. But when he spoke through his work, he was a giant. And he was just so unafraid and uncompromising. I would like to be able to be compared to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's so funny you should mention James Baldwin. I'm reading one of his short stories, Sonny's Blues. I tell you, the impact. He's such a brilliant
Yeah.
writer. What is one word? If you had to come up with one word to describe yourself, who is Alexander Boyce? One word to describe him.
Who is Alexander Boyce? One word. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I would say resilient. I'm gonna figure out a way. If there's anything that I would use to describe myself as resilient, whatever the challenge is, I'm going to figure out a way to overcome. So I would say resilient.
Resilient. Okay. And for creatives who are still trying to find their way, what advice would you share about pursuing a life fueled by passion and purpose?
The biggest thing, I think a lot of people overthink things and they believe that they need to have all of the answers to start. And so a lot of people don't have everything figured out in the beginning, how they're going to make money off of it and this and that, who they're going to sell it to and where they're going to sell it. And so that discourages a lot of people. But I would say that a lot of the things, and I would dare say most of it, you will figure out along the way. So you need to start without having all of the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. You need to start before you figure out everything. You go in the direction of your excitement. Wherever it is that excitement is, you go in that direction.
Mhm.
Because when you look at successful people, successful products, successful businesses, every one of them has had a huge element of luck, something that they didn't have any control over that just happened to work in their favor. And you can't know these things from the offset. You can only find that out once you do it. Even in my case, like I've had a lot of luck. Musically, like one of the biggest projects that I've ever undertaken, I did a lot of music for television shows, and it was just because the production company that did the TV shows, they were in the same building that my wife worked at the time. And so when I would go pick her up, I would see one of the guys who owned the company not knowing what he did. And he had a lot of tattoos and I had a lot of tattoos. So he would compliment me on my tattoos and I would him. And eventually we got to talking and then we developed a friendship. And then I found out what they do. And then they signed me as a producer to do this work. But that's not something that I made happen or I controlled. I had no idea that they were in this building. It was just sheer luck. A lot of things are a lot of the elements that is just pure luck. And I believe for every successful product or business or company, whatever, it's just, there's that element of luck that we downplay. We don't think it's luck. We think you are not going to control everything. There's some things that are beyond your control that are just going to work in your favor because you're a good person or you put it out there, but you have to put it out before figuring out everything. So my advice to creatives would be to start.
Just start. And a lot of people struggle with starting.
Absolutely. That's the hardest part.
What's next for you?
What's next for me? What I would like to do next is I would like to do more mentoring work with younger people, because I think it's so important to get younger Black people to believing that they actually have more power than the society is trying to tell them. They can really determine their outcomes. And so when I was a younger artist coming up, I didn't really have a lot of mentors readily available as far as people who did artistic or creative things. Most of the people that I knew had regular 9-to-5s. And so I was lost for a long time, doing what I felt like, okay, I should do or I had to do. And so looking back at it now, like I'm thinking I could have done this right out of high school, had I only knew. But I didn't have the people. So next for me, I would like to do more work with young Black people, especially to kind of help them figure out how to get their journey started.
I tell you, that's amazing. Alexander, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm so thankful that you were able to be on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
My pleasure.
I hope you'll join us again.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining Let's Talk Passion and Purpose. I hope you're leaving inspired and ready to elevate your journey. Remember to subscribe, rate, and share if you enjoyed today's episode. Stay connected, follow your passion, live purposefully, and we'll see you next time.